Hello, and welcome to the Driveline Podcast. My name is Trevor Johnson, and I will be your host for today's episode. This podcast is brought to you by the South Dakota Auto Dealers and the South Dakota Trucking Association. In this episode, we talk to Travis Vesley. He is the SDADA board president, and he is also the general manager at Courtesy Subaru in Rapid City. Travis has been very involved in the association, as well as very involved in the community in Rapid City. I knew everything about Courtesy Subaru growing up, just from ads and all their marketing campaigns. So we got to talk to Travis a little bit about how they do their marketing. We also talked a lot about electric vehicles, the future of the auto industry, and his experiences growing up, because he has been a part of the Courtesy Subaru dealership since he was 12 years old. This is a great conversation and a great story, and I hope that you guys enjoy this episode as much as I did. Let's get right into it.
My name is Travis Vesley. I'm the current chairman of the South Dakota Auto Dealers Association. I'm also the general manager of Courtesy Subaru in Rapid City. My family's owned the dealership since 1968. We've been a Subaru dealer since 1975, so we're definitely been around the auto industry. I've been around the auto industry my whole life, and we've definitely been in it for a long time.
Awesome. Yeah, well, that kind of rolls into my first kind of question here and first topic. So, how did you get into the industry, and then why do you kind of stay in the industry?
I got in the industry just because it was my first job when I was 12. I started working at the dealership filing paperwork because I was not allowed to drive the cars yet, obviously. And actually, I talked with my kids. I've got a 12-year-old daughter, and she's like, "Oh, I don't know what I want to be when I grow up. I don't know what I'm going to be." I'm like, hey, you don't have to decide now. You don't have to decide for a long time. But then I was thinking back to when I was 12. I knew exactly what I was going to do. It was always going to be I was going to work at the dealership in some capacity. A car dealership kid. I love cars.
Yeah.
And so it just made sense that that's where I was going to end up. So that was kind of always the end where I was going to end up. I went to college in Boise, Idaho at Boise State. And
Okay.
I worked a little bit there. And then in 2008, when the whole economy and housing market there crashed, it was like, well, I guess it's time to do something else. The job market there was flooded with engineers just looking for anything so they could pay their mortgage. So it was finding a job right at when I graduated from college was not going to happen to kind of what I wanted to do. So decided to move back and start working at the dealership again.
What did you go to school for?
I just general business
Okay.
with an entrepreneurship focus.
Right. Yeah. So what kind of keeps you in the industry?
I really like cars. And I think if you boil it down to a lot of stuff in the industry it gets very complicated, but it all comes down to I just like buying and selling cars. I like fixing cars. I like having a shop fix cars. But I like buying and selling cars. Everything about I've been car obsessed since I was a kid, like a lot of kids are. I just never grew out of it. There's always new challenges. It's a fun industry to be in, and
So what have been like the biggest transitions that you've seen through that time? Because you've obviously been in it since you were a little kid, so you've seen the dealership grow.
So for me, I started as the general manager in 2016, and so since then, the biggest transition was obviously COVID and what that did to everyone's business here, and the adjustments that we made. Luckily, in South Dakota, we didn't have to make that many adjustments. Everything kind of flowed fairly normal. But then the inventory challenges and just really changing the way we thought about selling new cars really changed.
Right.
Prior to that, when I first moved back and started working at the dealership, cash for clunkers was the other one that was a big shift, because that at the time was a fairly simple idea. Like, hey, you have this junky car that doesn't get good fuel economy. Let's trade it in. The government will pay, guarantee you're going to get X amount, $3,500 or $4,500 for that car that's probably not worth anything.
Right.
That's a pretty simple thing, but that completely changed the industry forever as far as what a cheap car actually is, because it removed all of those $1,000 and $2,000 and $3,000 cars from the market pretty much that were fairly reliable, just maybe not nice.
Right.
So that was a huge, huge change, and we still feel that.
Yeah, because it is kind of interesting, because I have been looking in like the used cars market and whatnot, and it's kind of hard to find those lower end cars, and I didn't quite know why. So that makes sense, actually.
Yeah. That started with cash for clunkers, and then through inflation the last 3 or 4 years, everything's just more expensive. And so it's more expensive for us as dealers to buy cars at auction because there aren't as many.
Right.
And so that really raises the value of every car in the market, and you just, everything goes up. And now I think
Right.
that it's starting to play into the more macro factor of the way cars are made now, because sometimes they're so expensive to fix. In our shop, we have a 2006 or 7 Subaru B9 Tribeca, which
Yep.
is not a proud car for Subaru. It's not something they're super amped about. It was kind of weird looking. It
Yeah.
has its issues like a lot of cars. But what we're finding now is we've got one with a problem with a gauge cluster, they think, but
Right.
Subaru may not even have the tools to reprogram that gauge cluster if we were to have to send it in. That car is not that old. I mean, 2006 is a pretty old car. We're getting close to 20 years. But if you look
Right.
back in the early 2000s, a 20-year-old car, those were still on the road. I mean, you're
Hmm.
talking late 90s or late 80s, early 90s cars. Those were still on the roads, fairly common, and could still be fixed. Now we're going to run into the problem where manufacturers aren't going to support these models that they've made forever, because the technology is changing so fast and how much technology they're cramming into the cars. You're going to start to see, I think in the future, you're going to start to see cars that are completely obsolete because of a single electronic part that just can't be fixed. And
Yeah.
that's a weird proposition. I mean, this car that I'm referring to is not a super nice car, but
Right.
other than it has one electrical component that may not be able to be fixed, and there aren't any new ones out there. There may be a used part. It's
Yeah.
basically a brick because of that,
Yeah. I've
which is,
kind of wondered that too, because
yeah, we're going to
as
run into
you,
that as
yeah,
far
as
as,
you run into like the technology stuff, like
yeah,
you look at your phone, like your phone is basically outdated after max 4 or 5 years, right?
right.
So as we put more technology in cars, back in the day it was all mechanical, and like
Well,
you can fix a gear, but it's not as easy to fix the technological stuff.
yep. And with the rise of all the manufacturers putting everything in that main screen in the middle of the dash,
Hmm.
if that screen goes bad in 10 years, is it going to be able to be repaired? Maybe. Is it going to be able to be replaced? Maybe. And that controls so many functions of the car.
With
And
like 30 adapters.
what, right, with adapt, yeah, there's going to be patches somewhere. I don't know. And then
Yeah.
that bleeds into a lot of really present issues that the auto industry has, like right to repair is a huge one.
Uh-huh. Yep.
With how advanced these systems are, I see the benefit, like in the farming community, where right to repair is a big deal, because these farmers want to be able to fix their tractors and stuff themselves, because they can do it quick, where they
Right.
don't need this. They don't, if they shouldn't need a specialized tool to fix something that they can fix themselves much faster than uh, than a mechanic can get to it possibly. But
Right.
on the car side, with how much technology is in these cars and how the safety features that they have, do you want some dude in his garage fixing stuff? I mean, that's a tough one. That's a really hard piece of legislation that I think is going to be a
Yeah.
big fight over the next few years.
Well, it's
I think
interesting
we're
for
just getting the
me.
start of it.
It's interesting for me to see because I have a bunch of friends in like the tuner culture and in all of like that
Yep.
modification stuff. And what does it do to like that car community when you come up with the right to repair stuff?
Right.
Like I just will be interested to see how that all works.
Yeah. So for them, they're really for it, because it gives them more access to it's like when people used to jailbreak their iPhones, and so they could add
Right.
features that weren't included, or
Right.
whatever, get access to the root drives of their phones to change things that Apple or whoever the manufacturer is didn't want you to necessarily have access to. But should you
Right.
have access to that? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. That's a really tough question. And I think the problem with right to repair bills is that they're trying to go all encompassing, encompass all consumables, all consumer purchase things. And,
Oh,
and I
really?
think having the right to alter your cell phone is a different deal than having the right to alter the base software of a car. I think those are
Yeah.
different things, because I mean, one's a 5,000 pound missile that can go 100 miles an hour if you want to, and one is a
Yeah.
phone. And
Yeah. Right.
they're different things. And I don't know. There's obviously not a magic fix to any of that. There's not a magic bill that's going to fix all of it. But man,
Right.
that's a lot of stuff
Especially as you start moving towards more of the self-driving or autonomous
there.
vehicles
Yeah.
of that sort. It's like,
Careful, none of them
how
drive
much
themselves.
access do we have? Yeah, none of them drive themselves.
Yeah.
Not well, not here.
No, I think Tesla's getting in the hot water that they deserve to be in for calling it autopilot and saying that they can drive
Right.
themselves, because sure, they can, but Mm. That's a slippery slope. I think a lot of the major manufacturers do a really good job of saying like these are driver assist aids. They're not. It's not going to drive itself. It might
Well,
be
then
hands
there's the
free, but
the Waymo ones in Arizona,
yeah, yeah,
and that's a whole those are self-driving, which is
they are.
crazy.
And should I think the big question there is should they be allowed to essentially beta test that on public streets? I think it's a little,
Right. That's
you
where it
know,
gets really kind of sketchy.
they had one kill somebody already a few
Yes,
years ago. Waymo did it. I think it was in Phoenix.
probably.
There was somebody in the car, but they were not in control. They were in the passenger seat, and it ran down a
Right.
bicyclist. I think is what it was. That
I
was an
did
odd
hear
one.
about that.
It was a few
Yeah.
years ago, and I don't know what happened with. I don't know where the whatever happened with that. But I mean, the self driving stuff is still around, driving around.
Yeah,
So
it'll be a big part of where we're going in the next probably 10 years as far as like we'll see a lot more of it, which
yep,
should be interesting as far as the technology goes, and I hope that it gets safer and better as we all do.
right,
But I'm interested to see how that will affect your guys' industry.
right. I think it could
So,
be it'll be interesting. I think the right now the bigger concern with self driving I think is with the trucking industry
yep.
and the the model of hey we don't need drivers necessarily and no you might not need a driver to move this load from A to B
Right.
but you do need drivers because those are I mean that's I can't remember the demographic but men between the ages of 18 and 49 I think that's the most common occupation so if you start eliminating that
Oh,
job
yeah.
nationwide you're eliminating people's ability to buy the goods and services that are on the trucks so
Yeah, exactly.
I don't yeah that's
So
a
how does the economy work? Like if that's
that's a tough one it's like we're opening doors but every time you open a door it closes a really big one sometimes too
right, you got to see what it's closing as well, for
right
sure. The other thing that I've been always really interested in as far as auto dealers is you guys are always super involved in the community and you have such a brand. What kind of goes into you and your thought process when you're sponsoring stuff, when you're doing different branding operations or marketing things?
sure yeah so with community involvement I'm a Subaru dealer and Subaru is like a helicopter parent and holds our hand through a lot of it. They make programs that are dead simple for us. We do a lot of
Right,
stuff in addition to those programs. Like everybody, I mean, the big one is Share the Love, where they donate money for every car that we sell in the month of December and part of November also. Um, and they have these other events throughout the year. Like we just finished one up where we donated coats to a homeless shelter. It's kind of a homeless shelter here. It's the Hope Center, or not the Hope Center. Sorry, One Heart,
right,
and it was coats for kids and then we had some left over, so we took it to McKinney-Vento Coat Drop, which is in a school here. And McKinney-Vento is a nationwide program that gets school supplies and clothing and things to children who don't have access to it. So
right.
that one was a good one where we donated like I think it was 150 or 180 coats or something like that, which was really cool. But as far as if a kid in little league comes and asks me to donate, I'm probably going to do it.
Right.
Especially if it's the kid coming in and not just the parents. I mean, I always like that when the kids come in and talk. And I just gave some money to one of the
Right.
post baseball teams, the smaller one, post 320 here. It was a friend of mine's son is playing, and he's like, "Hey, can he come in and ask you if you want to sponsor?" And I'm like, "Yeah, that's fine." And I expected both of them coming. It was just this one 16-year-old kid, and I was like, "This is great."
That's
He came in
awesome.
and
Yeah.
he gave me the hard pitch. He started at the top and then he worked his way down. He didn't start. Oh, you could do like $100. He was started at the very top, and I was like, hey, I appreciate that. But it is a big. It's always
Sales,
traditional
man.
thing that car dealers do, where we're involved in the community, and you you have to do it. I mean, in a lot of cases, the car dealership, especially in the smaller towns, that's the biggest business in that town a lot of
Yeah.
times, and one of the bigger employers. So you have to support the community if you want them to
Right.
support you. It's a two-way street. I've always looked at it as I started back at the dealer when I first started working here was 2008. Um, and that was one of the first things I started doing was our marketing. And I started to look at our budget for giving back to the community as really part of my marketing budget instead of like
Yeah.
some separate thing. It had to be part
Right.
of the marketing budget because it goes hand in hand. And then you can you can look at that as you may not see direct, you're not hey, come in and
Right.
mention that. You can't track that goodwill.
No.
But over time, you do see the benefit of it, and it's just the right thing to do. I mean,
Well, I just know
if you
like,
have the ability to help out, I feel like you should. And
yeah,
we're telling people what to do with what their money and their time, but um,
yeah.
it is something you should do.
Yeah, well, I like know growing up in Rapid City, I would always see like I knew who the car dealers were. As a little
Yeah,
kid, I knew who the car dealers were. I played T-ball and all that little league and all that kind of stuff. And like it's up there with like the insurance jingles. Like you
yeah,
know what the insurance jingles are
uh-huh.
and you know who the car dealerships are. And
Yep.
I attribute that kind of marketing to my how I look at branding and how I want to go about branding and building a brand. And you guys were a great role model for that. So I was just wondering like
Yeah.
what your thought process is. So that's
Well,
great.
and Subaru in the auto industry is the king of branding marketing. That's all they
Right.
do. I in November and December and part of January, they don't advertise cars, period. Like there's not a car on any of the nationwide advertisement. It's all just, hey, we're giving money to these 5 charities when you buy a car. You pick a charity, we'll give them money. If you want to give to all of them, we can split it amongst all of them. They don't, it's
Right.
the last few years, there hasn't even been a car in the nationwide ad, which I think is really different from the way car manufacturers advertise during the holidays. I mean, you've got there's always the ones that always stand out are the Lexus ones where some guy surprises his wife with a Lexus for Christmas, which
Yep.
in some years couldn't be more out of touch
Yeah,
with the way the
absolutely.
economy and the way people actually feel. But it's a cool idea.
Right.
I know my wife would be like, "You did what? Don't
Yeah.
no, don't do that." But I do think brand, like you said, branding is important. But to go with your branding, you also have to back that up. So
Right.
in my mind, branding has to be a very genuine form of advertising because if you brand one way but you don't actually do that, I think it's really easy, especially for as smart as consumers are now. It's really easy for them to pick that out and be like, that's not really what they think. They're just you
No.
know they're just playing off of what they think is going to get them the most traction.
Right. Well, I always look at Red Bull. That's been my
Yeah.
MO forever because they don't have a single can in their ads. They've never had
Nope.
their product in their ads ever. This is the lifestyle. And
Yep.
Subaru's done a really good job at going towards like the adventurers and the like dog
Yep.
community for the last few years.
Subaru
So
advertises dogs and emotional terrorism. Their ads try to make you cry, or they make you happy because you have a dog, or you want to go
right,
camping. There's your three
exactly.
things.
Those are the three things. Do you want to put a topper on your Subaru?
Yeah,
We can do that.
rooftop tents. Hey, they'll work.
Is there a Subaru branded rooftop tent yet?
Yes, there is.
Oh, of course there is.
Truly makes it. I've got one that's going to be put on an Outback Wilderness here, or Forest or Wilderness here pretty soon to go in my showroom.
Oh, there you go. Perfect. Yeah. So what has kind of been your focus this year?
So this year, I mean, for 2023, my focus was hang on and try and figure it out because it was a
Yeah.
weird year. I can speak for myself. I can't speak for everyone else, but it was 2023 was a really good year for us.
Right.
At the same time, every single month it felt like the worst month ever. I don't know. I don't know what it was. Sales were fine. It just felt like we were holding on for dear life to something, and I couldn't ever put my finger on what was making me feel that way because all the numbers bear out that it was a really good month.
Right.
So moving forward now, the focus is to try and figure out why it felt bad. I mean, it's it was hard last year to try to figure it out because you were having success, but I didn't feel like we were doing anything that was that special, unique to have a good year. But it all
Right.
worked out great. As far as the Auto Dealers Association, the focus last year was righting the ship and make sure that everything is, make sure we're not losing money and make sure that we
Right.
can exist as an organization because I think it's starting to. I hope it stays in people's mind how important the association actually is because you look at
Right.
some of these bills that are coming out and some things that are proposed at the federal level that we may be able to fight at the state level if we don't have an association to fight that. We're stuck with whatever we get because the
Right.
idea of it a single dealership influencing anything on the national level is pretty small. I mean, you
Yeah.
can you also need to participate with the National Auto Dealers Association, but at a state level, there's a lot of things that we can do to make sure that our industry is safe from weird laws that may come
Yeah.
out and strange things. I mean, we've seen I mean, there's tons of them. I mean, we could throw out
Yeah,
anecdotes
right.
all day about what are the weird laws that get proposed. There's constantly odd
Well,
things
it's
that
so
come out.
much defense. Yeah, there's a lot of
Right.
defense that people don't
It's a
see.
lot of defense, and then you mix in the offense of trying to make sure that your franchise laws are stay friendly to dealerships, because ultimately
Right.
that's the whole point of the association, is to make sure our franchise laws are protected and to make sure
Yeah.
that this model that we have stays the beneficial to us.
Yeah.
I think there are factors that were every month there's news stories about how the franchise system is under attack. There was a good one last month. The company VinFast, they're an electric car company out of Vietnam. They
Right.
announced that they're going to, instead of going a direct to consumer model like most electric car companies do, they are going with a dealer franchise model when they enter the US. And I think they've started taking applications. They haven't yet. They're going to soon. So I don't know. I think that's a positive sign
Right.
for the franchise model, because it's a new entrant to the industry who's not defaulting to direct to consumer model, which I think it's a great sign.
Yeah,
Um,
that's awesome because they're looking at it that direction.
right.
Because I think a lot of these electric car companies come from Silicon Valley and they're all tech companies that build
Right.
a car. And so they're like,
Yeah.
this is how tech companies sell tech products.
Yep.
So that's been the disconnect, I think.
Yeah. And Tesla's obviously the easy one to pick on. They sell cars
Right.
like computers. They sell
Yes.
them like it's a phone. Like we make a big splashy announcement, like the Cybertruck is the perfect example. The big splashy announcement, the promise to the moon, and
Yep.
then it takes forever to deliver on it because they're trying to live up to that promise. But it's really hard with a car to
It's
promise something, and then you get out in the real world, and sometimes the equations that they run, especially for like efficiency, the range of the batteries, sometimes that doesn't bear out in the real world because there's a lot of
no.
variables there. I don't
Well,
know.
it comes down to manufacturing. Manufacturing is
Yeah,
so incredibly hard for anybody, especially on something that
right.
big. So
Yeah.
it's like, yeah, we build the prototype and then we're like, okay, how do we build more of these though?
How do we build the 500,000 of these a year that we think we need?
Yeah, exactly. That's
Yeah.
because what I also think of is what do you think about the Hyundai partnership with Amazon and where that's going?
No, so the initial reaction is to recoil in horror, like every car. You're like, oh, what are they doing? But if
Right,
you look at it, the dealers are still controlling that sale. The pricing
right,
is still set by the dealers. The delivery is still set up by dealers. I'm more okay with that one after I look into it than I was at first glance, because at first glance you're like, man, what are we doing?
right.
But it's more like the Costco program that's been around forever that dealers can participate in, except this one's exclusive to Hyundai. But
Hmm.
where the dealer
Right.
basically sets the price, and Amazon shoppers get access to cars. I don't know. It seems like they're tiptoeing into something else, but I don't
Yeah.
know that they're going to have the success that they want out of the program as it's laid out, because it really, again, consumers are smarter than we give them credit for a lot of times. The first article I read where it was like the full thing, and I'm reading through the comments, and someone posted that like, hey, this is no different than buying the car from the dealership. The
Right.
pricing is set by the dealer, which, again, if we listen to what customers actually want, they want transparency in the pricing.
Right.
I don't know what to take from that, other than there's Tesla raises and lowers their prices also.
Yeah.
But people seem to not mind when it's the manufacturer doing it. The notion that a customer is going to pay less if it's direct to consumer is nonsense. It's complete and utter nonsense. You'll pay MSRP is what would happen if every manufacturer suddenly tomorrow was like, hey, we're gonna cut out the dealers. We're gonna cut them out. We're just gonna sell direct to consumer. The price is going to be the price. The price is MSRP, and we'll change that as we see necessary, depending on market conditions.
Yeah.
The thing that gets overlooked with the dealer model a lot of times is there's a break between those manufacturers and the end consumer. And that break is sometimes good because I care about my reputation, where Subaru might not care about individual transactions. I can care about the small number of transactions compared to their total transactions. I can care about those more because I don't have as many of them to worry about.
Well, there
Um,
wouldn't be any bartering anymore. Like you
right.
wouldn't be able to negotiate a price or
No,
different things from the dealer. It'd just be this is the price, pay it.
this is the price. And so if that's what they really want is transparency in pricing, I mean, one price model is what they want. And you know, I don't think there's a ton of dealers that would necessarily hate that. The thing that we don't like is the manufacturer telling us how to run our business and how much to sell things for, which gets a little burdensome and tiresome.
Well,
I,
like as a
I don't know.
consumer
It's hard.
looking at,
It's hard to
yeah,
try and parse out what consumers actually want there. I think they're complaining without knowing the full picture because the manufacturer would charge the MSRP. A dealer might charge less to try and sell more cars. That's
right,
the absolute truth. The manufacturers don't care necessarily about the individual person buying the car because they've already sold that car to the dealer. That car is
right.
already a sold unit. That's money in the bank for them. The only person holding the bag there is the dealer at the end until they sell it.
Yeah. Well, the way that I see it as a consumer is I would use Amazon or something like that to go and look and find a car that I'd want, and then I'd go to the dealer to go
Yeah.
negotiate that price because it's just like easier. It'd be almost like a search tool, like
Yeah.
Facebook or something else, where it's
Yep.
like, I don't know where cars are. Let me look where a bunch of cars
Right.
are and find the best deal. That's usually the consumer thought process, I think.
And I think you're right on that. I think that's the way it will be used. Is it's another search tool. It's another another good
Car
place. And
ID or whatever.
Amazon has the has the web traffic to make that one of the better ones that is available. I mean
Yeah.
they're Amazon.
Yeah, they are the new mountain. It was and still kind of is Google as far as giants that you can go around but you can't climb that or
Yeah.
move that mountain.
Yep.
Amazon's now there for online shopping. So
Yep.
it's
They
like no
are
matter what you do, like it's hard to ignore their presence in
yep
any market.
for sure.
So that's kind of been interesting.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that bears out. If that program stays the way it is, I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. I think it's something that more
Mhm.
manufacturers will jump into because, like you said, it is a really good way to access more shoppers.
Yeah. And then the shoppers only have to go to one place,
Yep.
which is kind of scary, but at the same time it's like if they're there, use it.
Yeah.
So,
But how many dealers use Auto Trader or Car Gurus or Cars.com or any of those? It's very
right.
similar to that type of setup where you have,
Yeah.
the one place that people go to look for cars.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. What are you kind of looking at as far as legislative session this year and like what are your focuses and what have you seen that has been kind of interesting to you?
Um, I think I don't know if it actually went anywhere. Christine was talking about a bill that was basically banning the ban of gas powered. It wasn't gas powered vehicles, but gas powered engines.
Yeah.
So to ban the ban, I think we're getting a little in the weeds on some stuff. I don't think
Yeah.
there's been any, I don't think there's been any real major ones. The seatbelt law has been one that I've been watching. The seat, not the seatbelt law, but the ability to consider seatbelt usage, to have seatbelt usage be admissible in a lawsuit type situation. I think that's a
Right.
good one, but it seems like
Yeah.
that one's dead now. Um,
Yep. I went to
yeah, there
judiciary and
there wasn't from what I'm watching, there wasn't anything that seemed like super vital to the auto industry
right.
anyway. It seemed like there was a lot more focus on things that were going to affect the trucking industry, which is
Yep.
fairly typical because they
Uh-huh.
have so much more being an agricultural state. There's a lot of things that the trucking industry gets thrown their way because they have so many
Yeah.
things feeding into that industry. Um, but I think the focus is to just make sure none of the laws get anything that's weird thrown into them that'll affect the auto industry negatively or retail industry in general. I mean that's the other one that we need to keep an eye on is things that are important to retail in general. Um,
Right.
I, it's kind of broad, but
But it does affect
right.
everybody. So,
Yep.
which you're included in that everybody. So,
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
are you gonna get any chance to make it down there this year?
I don't know if I'm going to get a chance to make it here this year. Hopefully next year. Next year I will. But if something comes up and I need to be there, I'm going to
Yeah.
be there.
There you go.
If one of those weird things comes up, I think it's important to be visible and be there to make sure that our position on whatever the subject is known and is known that it's important to us.
Yeah. I just got the running out of time notification. That's
Yep.
okay. But yeah, cool. Well, what makes like dealing in South Dakota or being a car dealer in South Dakota different from maybe another state?
Um, Simplicity. So the best example is we were in my 20 group meeting, and I'm sure most everybody that's going to listen to this is probably in a 20 group or has been in a 20 group.
Yeah.
It's a great thing to be in if you're a dealer. We're in a 20 group meeting talking about pay plans, and we started sharing pay plans for finance managers. Dealer in California, their finance manager pay plan was 7 pages long, 7 pages, because they have so many strange things in there as far as like break pay time, paid breaks as a finance manager, which is crazy. It,
Yeah.
it, the simplicity that South Dakota has, and it's, for better or worse, everything takes a little longer to get here.
Right.
Technology, good things take longer, bad things do too, where all the sometimes the crazy legislation that you see on either the East Coast or the West Coast, it has a chance to filter out before it gets here, and so you filter out that crazy. It seems like in a lot of cases, a lot of knee-jerk reactions. Where in South Dakota, we seem to be a little more patient with
Yeah.
letting things work out, see how it goes. If it's something that makes sense, then it makes sense. But yeah, it's hard to compare it because there's so many states, and every state is a little different. I know titling cars sometimes in Wisconsin is nightmarish.
Right.
We've sold a couple cars to people from Wisconsin. It's like it's Looney Tunes there. Some of the things that they need to do,
Hmm.
and then getting a hold of anybody, getting somebody on the phone from some of the DMVs across the country is very hard, because they're
Right.
just getting back to work now. Um,
Yeah.
but no, South Dakota is super easy for a lot of that stuff because everything seems very sensible. Some things don't go as fast as you maybe want, but everything seems to move, which is good.
Yeah. What are you also seeing in as far as what Subaru's doing compared to like other car companies that you like, dislike? What kind of goes
I
along with that?
that's a really hard one too, because Subaru in general moves at a glacier like pace for things.
Yeah.
I would have really liked to see them jump. I know, bad electric cars, whatever. I would have liked to see them jump more into electric cars quicker. The car we have is a shared platform with Toyota. It's not a great electric car. It doesn't have a long range. It's not particularly exciting. I would have liked to
Right.
see them jump further into that, but at the same time, I would have rather seen it jump in as hybrids. I think
Hmm.
the industry in general um, should lean more towards hybrids. I know the chairman of Toyota, Akio Toyota or whatever, he had some comments that he made a couple days ago about how he feels the electric car market will top out at about 30% of the market, which I'm inclined to listen to what he has to say, not just because I agree with
Right.
him, but because he seems pretty pragmatic in all of his analysis of it. Because there are certain times where an electric car is not going to cut it. My
Yeah.
last 20 group meeting was in California. I got an Uber driver. I got a driver to take me to the airport, and he had a Honda, and he's like, "Yeah, I've been looking at Teslas, and it was just chit chatting about where I'm from. He's like, "Are there a lot of electric cars where you're at?" I was like, "Not a ton. There's some.
No.
There's not a ton, but the infrastructure's not there. We don't have the infrastructure here that didn't necessarily support it." And then like last week, I think especially those in northern climates saw what the drawbacks are to electric cars in the winter, that they can't charge as fast. And it's
No.
not that they have less range. Obviously, I think most people understand that they have less range in the winter, but if you have to wait longer to charge, it's like one flight being delayed at an airport. One flight that'll cascade through, because it's everything. There's dominoes there, and if you
Right.
have one person that's got to, this person's taking 2 hours to charge, the next one's going to take that long too, and it's just going to cascade through. So then you got charging stations full of dead cars that can't move. Um, eh, Subaru in general is super easy to work with on everything.
Right.
For manufacturers, I'm very lucky because I
Yeah.
know, the Ford dealers, the stuff that they deal with. I'm sure on the whole, Ford is okay, but they make some bonehead decisions and really put dealers in an awkward place, especially the last couple of years.
Yeah.
Um, and I think every manufacturer does that. I think the best way I've heard Subaru described by other people that have multiple franchises is like Subaru is a helicopter parent. They want to be involved in everything you do. They're going to hold our hand through it. Sometimes it's very annoying
Yeah.
because I don't work for Subaru. I'm a franchise, but I don't work for them. So I want to be able to have some freedom in the way that I do things. But at the same time, they don't put a lot of crazy demands on us. They've really lightened up on facilities, which is nice. I mean,
Right.
I think like any manufacturer, they have a certain idea of what they want their dealers to look like. They've become more flexible, which is important. There's a couple more
Yeah.
areas where they should be more flexible, but they're also as a company, they're dealing with immense growth over the last 10 years. I mean, 10 years ago, Subaru was selling 200 to 300,000 cars nationwide. Now they're approaching 800,000 in
Yeah.
that short time. Even with some decline over the last couple of years because of supply chain issues, they were hurt really bad with supply chain problems. They're trying to deal with that growth as best they can. So some of it's
Yeah.
going to spill off into dealers having to do things that seem a little crazy, but overall, I
Right.
mean, compared to other manufacturers, I always think I'm very very lucky to have Subaru because it's just
Yeah.
I don't have to worry that our CEO is going to make some crazy asinine comment that we're going to have
Yeah.
to try and deal with legally, let alone like just deal
Right.
with at a dealership level.
Right. Well, yeah, I mean, and being in the area, the Midwest that we are, like Subarus are huge. Like
Yeah,
I
yeah,
know growing up that everybody's like, "Oh, there was like a Subaru in almost everybody's driveway."
yeah,
So, at
yeah.
least one. So,
Yeah, they
it's
do
been
really
good.
well. Yeah, I mean, here because they ideally they should just be dead simple. They get decent
Yep.
gas mileage, they do well in the snow, and they're safe. That that's basically what you want out of a car. If you look for a car as a mode of transportation, those are three things that should be at the top of your list, especially if you live in an
Right.
area where it snows. You just want to be able to go. You don't have to
Yep.
worry about
Yep. Exactly. And they do that for sure.
it.
But
Yeah.
yeah, thank you so much, Travis, for joining me today. And yeah, thank you guys all for listening. We will have more of these Driveline podcasts out as we continue, and we'll be reaching more into the trucking industry as well as the auto industry. So, yeah, I'm your host, Trevor Johnson. Thank you guys so much for listening, and I will see you in the next one.